Imagine this. You wake up one ordinary morning in 1914. The smell of coal smoke hangs in the air, and the latest paper screams, "War in Europe!" People flood the streets in panic. Stock markets tumble. Gold prices surge overnight. But somewhere far from the noise in a quiet, wood-paneled room a handful of men sip their coffee and smile. Because this chaos is exactly what they wanted. Who are they? Generals? Politicians? No. The main character of this story isn't holding a rifle, he's holding a checkbook. Today, we'll peel back one of history's darkest veils. Who were the bankers that secretly started World War I, and why did they do it? The early 20th century was a glittering age, on the surface. Electric lights, automobiles, telegraphs. Humanity felt unstoppable. But beneath the progress, Europe was a ticking bomb. Germany, young and hungry for empire, challenged Britain's supremacy at sea. France still burned with humiliation from losing Alsace-Lorraine decades earlier. Russia and Austria-Hungary wrestled for influence in the Balkans, while the once mighty Ottoman Empire limped toward collapse. The continent was divided into two rival camps, the Triple Entente, Britain, France, Russia, and the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy. All it needed was one spark. But here's the thing, wars aren't born only from politics. They need fuel. And that fuel is money. Behind closed doors, international bankers studied the growing tension not with fear, but anticipation. Because war meant contracts, loans, and interest payments that could reshape the entire world economy. For them, war wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity dressed as disaster. History books tell us about kings and emperors, the visible rulers. But history rarely names those who financed them. Behind every throne stood a banker, quietly holding the leash of credit. At the top of this invisible hierarchy was the Rothschild family. 5 brothers, each stationed in a different capital. London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, Naples. 5 nations, one bloodline, one ambition, to control the flow of European money. Their strategy was genius. While monarchs fought for land, the Rothschilds built an empire that needed no flag. They lent to both sides of conflicts, ensuring profit whether cannons roared or treaties were signed. It's said that during the Napoleonic Wars, their couriers spread news faster than any army, allowing them to anticipate market swings and turn chaos into gold. Fast forward a century, the same network still pulsed beneath Europe's veins. Governments depended on their credit, industries ran on their loans. Across the Atlantic, another titan emerged, J. Pierpont Morgan. Born into privilege, Morgan turned American industry into his private chessboard: steel, railroads, energy. When the U.S. Treasury nearly went bankrupt during the 1893 panic, it was Morgan who lent the government gold, essentially buying national stability. By 1914, he could dictate markets with a telegram. And then came the Warburg family. Based in Hamburg, the Warburgs were intellectual bankers, analytical, strategic. One of them, Paul Warburg, immigrated to the United States and became one of the architects of the Federal Reserve System, the U.S. central bank established in 1913. His brother, Max Warburg, served as an advisor to Germany's Kaiser. So when the war began, 2 brothers on opposite sides of the ocean were shaping the finances of both warring powers. When soldiers marched with rifles, these families marched with ledgers. And the real battles were fought not with bullets, but with bonds. June 28, 1914. A sunny morning in Sarajevo, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, sits beside his wife in an open car. Moments later, 2 gunshots change history. Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old nationalist, pulls the trigger. The Archduke slumps forward. The Duchess collapses beside him. Within weeks, telegrams fly, armies mobilize, and Europe slides into war. Textbooks call it the spark that ignited World War I. But could a teenager's pistol truly set half the planet on fire? Behind Princip stood the Black Hand, a shadowy Serbian group. Some evidence points to rogue officials in Belgrade, but others see the event as a perfect pretext, a stage cue, for powers already prepared. Because when war breaks out, the money machines roar to life. Governments must buy weapons. Weapons require factories. Factories need loans. Loans come from the banks. And interest, the sweet residue of blood, flows back to the lenders. By the time the first shells fell on Belgium, the Rothschilds, Morgans, and Warburgs had already positioned their gold. War bonds were drafted, supply contracts signed. Even before the first soldier died, the profit ledgers were already in motion. Was it all orchestrated? We may never prove it absolutely, but history has fingerprints, and these prints smell like ink and gold dust. When the Great War erupted, nations raced not only to recruit men, but to borrow money. Within the first month, Britain spent over £350 million, Germany issued billions in marks, France flooded the public with war bonds plastered with patriotic posters. But none of these governments had enough gold in reserve, so they turned to private banks, the same names echoing in both hemispheres. Across the ocean, America claimed neutrality. Yet behind the curtain, J.P. Morgan and Company became the official purchasing agent for Britain and France. Morgan arranged shipments of steel, oil, uniforms, and ammunition, all financed through massive loans from U.S. banks. In total, over $2 billion flowed across the Atlantic. Here's the problem. If Germany somehow won, those loans would vanish, so neutrality became bad business, and bad business is something bankers never tolerate. By 1917, when the U.S. finally entered the war, Morgan's contracts exploded in value. Factories roared 24 hours a day. Every bullet fired meant another cent of interest. For governments, war meant survival. For bankers, it meant the harvest season. Some historians estimate that private financiers earned more in 4 years of war than in the previous 40 years of peace combined. And when the cannons stopped, the interest payments did not. By 1918, the world was unrecognizable. Empires had fallen: Russia's Tsar, Austria's Kaiser, the Ottoman Sultan. Tens of millions were dead, but some fortunes had never been better. The Rothschilds retained dominance in Europe's post-war bond markets. J.P. Morgan emerged as America's banker to the world. The Warburgs, though Germany was defeated, rebuilt faster than many governments, and the newly created Federal Reserve now stood at the center of global finance, ready to orchestrate the century ahead. Ordinary citizens bore the debt through taxes and inflation. Soldiers went home to broken economies. Yet the interest on war loans kept flowing, a quiet river of money from the masses to the few. It raises a haunting question. If war destroys wealth, why do the same people always get richer? Because perhaps war doesn't destroy wealth. When the guns fell silent, the ledgers kept talking. History hides its most important moments in the quietest rooms. In 1910, 7 of the world's most powerful bankers boarded a private train bound for Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. No press, no records, just secrecy. Among them, Paul Warburg, Frank Vanderlip, Nelson Aldrich, and representatives of J.P. Morgan. Their mission? To create a central banking system that would unite America's scattered banks under one private control. That meeting birthed the Federal Reserve System. Officially, it was about financial stability. Unofficially, it gave a small circle of financiers the power to issue money, set interest rates, and steer credit, the lifeblood of nations. The Fed was signed into law in 1913. 1 year later, the world plunged into war. Coincidence? Maybe. But ask yourself, what better time to introduce a new money system than when governments suddenly need unlimited funds? As European empires bled, American bankers quietly became the lenders of last resort to the world. Every shell fired in France echoed like a cash register in New York. November 1918. The guns fell silent, but the debt did not. Britain owed billions to America. France was broke. Germany was punished with reparations so massive they could never be paid in full. The Treaty of Versailles, hailed as the dawn of peace, became instead a financial straitjacket. Germany's currency collapsed. Children played with stacks of worthless marks. And who organized the international loans that kept Europe afloat? The same network of banks that had financed the war itself. In London and New York, bond markets flourished. Reconstruction loans, war reparations, currency stabilization, all profitable ventures. For every city rebuilt, another loan was issued. For every nation helped, a new interest stream began. The Rothschilds strengthened their London operations. Morgan's partners became global diplomats. The Warburgs, astonishingly, advised on Germany's economic recovery, a recovery funded by American banks. So yes, the war ended, but the financial system that grew from its ashes became the true victor. We're taught that World War I erupted from nationalism, secret alliances, and a tragic assassination, but rarely do textbooks mention money. Yet every cause leads back to economics. Competition for colonies was competition for resources. Alliances were driven by loans and trade. And the arms race, the grand build-up of dreadnoughts and artillery, was financed by the very banks that later sold the bonds to rebuild what those weapons destroyed. War is the world's cruelest business model. Destroy, rebuild, collect. Think of it this way. When a government borrows to fight, it signs its future taxpayers into servitude. Generations pay interest on money that bought bullets for a war they never saw. That's why some historians whisper, World War I wasn't started by generals, it was underwritten by bankers. In 1914, millions marched off believing they were defending honor and homeland. By 1918, many no longer remembered why. What if their sacrifice served a different flag, one made of numbers and signatures? When the Great War ended, the debt war began. Governments owed central banks, banks owed bondholders, citizens owed taxes. The wheel turned, and at its center sat the same families who had funded both sides. Even today, the fingerprints remain. Our global economy still runs on debt-based currency, a system designed in the same era, by the same minds. Crisis, chaos, war, debt. The cycle repeats because the mechanism never changed. Maybe the real battlefield was never in Europe. Maybe it was inside the vaults. Look closely at history. The rhythm is familiar. Financial panic, political division, a spark, and then the march of boots once more. The names change. Morgan becomes Citibank, Rothschild becomes investment consortiums, but the architecture remains. Money creates war. War reshapes money. Today, conflicts erupt not only with bombs but with sanctions, markets, and currency wars. Trillions move with a keystroke. And still, somewhere in a quiet room, someone is smiling over the chaos. History doesn't repeat itself. It compounds interest. So before you scroll away, ask yourself one thing. Who truly writes history? The leaders we vote for, or the financiers who hold the debts they inherit? Guns don't start wars. The people who control the money do.